Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news, the story behind the story, hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that'll determine what the future will bring. And I have to remind you the views that are expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and, well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster as we analyze what is taking place in our country today. And I would simply point out that the people at these Treasury Department, Mr. Geithner and the others have said, we've got nothing to worry about from our major banks. We tested 19 of them, so-called stress test. In other words, what would happen if the financial contraction goes on for another couple of years? And almost all of them did very, very well, or a few of them need a little more capital. What they don't mention is why they let the people cheat. And how did they cheat? Why, very simply, they did not have to mark down their assets to the actual market level. They used something like the mark to model. In other words, whatever you wanted to say something was worth, it was that. And as a result, why all of our major financial institutions, or almost all of them, are really solvent, whereas the truth is they're actually insolvent, but they are afraid to let the American people know the truth. What are your thoughts on that, Bob?
I agree with you completely on that facet. The other facet is that many of them received the flow-through of funds that went through AIG, which allowed them to get large loans from government. And that money allowed them, along with the mark-to-model, to come out with these fraudulent, absurd earnings that they've come out with. And the second quarter is not going to be very good because they've wasted all their ammo, so to speak. But those 19 banks are all bankrupt. And, no matter how they paint it, no matter how Washington and Wall Street lies about it, it's not going to change anything. The situation is going to continue to deteriorate.
All right, fine. Well, now, of course, we find that Chrysler is talking about bankruptcy. Do you think Chrysler is actually going to go into bankruptcy, or do you think they're going to be able to work out some agreement with the unions and certainly with the people who hold their bonds to have to avoid going into bankruptcy?
Well, I think Chrysler has been a hopeless case for years, and I expect that they will definitely go under. General Motors will as well. And if you remember previously when I was on your program, that I said these programs of destruction of these companies began in 1980. And so this is nothing new. Anyway, General Motors is going down as well. I see they're swapping bonds for common stock, which is just ludicrous, because if they're going bankrupt, what's going to be left for a common shareholder? Nothing, or virtually nothing. And so I don't expect that will do much.
What's going to happen to the bondholders if they don't actually take the stock? Will they have any claim at all on the company if it goes into bankruptcy? Or when they go into bankruptcy, do they lose everything?
They'll have nothing.
So the outlook for a lot of people, especially the older people who invest in General Motors, because it had paid such a good dividend, is pretty grim, isn't it?
Right. When we come back, there's two things I'll mention in regard to this.
All right, fine. Well, our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster, and we'll be back here in just a moment or two with Bob as we try to give you a rundown of what's really going on behind the scenes. The things you're not going to read in the local newspaper for sure. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest this afternoon is Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster, and we're talking about really what's going on financially. We're talking about General Motors. General Motors is certainly the leading automotive company in our nation for many years, is now on the edge of bankruptcy. Now, what most people do not understand is that in many ways this is a scam. They're transferring intentionally and purposely their major manufacturing facilities overseas to Russia, to China, down to South America. They know exactly what they're doing. They just don't want the American people to know. And as long as the government's foolish enough, I'd not say foolish enough, they're in on the scam as well, but as long as the American people are willing to throw in a few $1 billion, simply this will be certainly used down the line to help General Motors transfer its centers of operation to other nations. But go ahead, Bob. You had some thoughts on the so-called General Motors bankruptcy?
Well, there's two more factors. I think anybody who is professionally in the market, like myself and recommendations, had to know that when GM was in the $38 range, that they were in serious, serious trouble. What they had been doing essentially for about 5 years had been giving cars away. I mean, just not making any money, but keeping the assembly lines going, so to speak. And I recommended a short position at 38, which means you bet the stock's going to go down. And now it's selling around 3.5. So the people who did that have made an immense amount of money. And we've had many more like that. I think the reason why the money was given to General Motors was because they wanted to try to delay as long as possible the impact of the failure. And the reason why is because of credit default swaps. These are derivatives where somebody owns, let's say, $10 million worth of GM bonds, and they pay $500,000 to insure them and against bankruptcy. And now we got this looming bankruptcy, and the government is wringing their hands figuring, what are we going to do now when many of the people in the unregulated derivative market are running naked. In other words, the people who sold the credit default swaps to the people who owned the bonds didn't have any money.
What you're really talking about, well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest is Bob Chapman. He was talking about derivative swaps, and basically what these are insurance policies. We guarantee the General Motors bonds. You've got nothing to worry about. You'll get your money back. You'll get your regular dividend payments, and we promise you, and you give us so much money, and we're going to insure it. But the trouble is that they allowed these companies to write insurance policies without any reserves. Why would anybody in their right mind, allow that? Well, high government officials were in on the scam. The whole thing is designed to destroy our economic system. Remember, the people, Henry Paulson of the Council on Foreign Relations, negotiated this with a man in the SEC named Mr. William Donovan, who just happened to be from the Council on Foreign Relations of the Skull and Bone Secret Society. And these people in these very covert and secret organizations set this whole thing up to destroy our economy. Why? Because they're dedicated to world government, and the first thing you've got to do is destroy our nation, impoverish our people, and out of the ashes will come this wonderful new dream of theirs, like the Phoenix, this wonderful world order they're bringing about. So go ahead and pick up the story there, Bob.
So what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of defaulting. The last time this happened was with AIG. Previous to that, there was Lehman. And previous to that, there was Bear Stearns. And we are going to see the same thing happen, the chaos that came about in the case of the others. And they're going to have to find another way to flow through funds so that the holders of these insurance contracts, we'll call them, can get paid off. See, the money that went from the Fed through AIG, $101.3 billion, was paid off to all of the banks and others that were holding these insurance policies on other things previously. So now we have another episode with just one company. I mean, can you imagine? There's hundreds and thousands of companies that this is going to go on in time. And so the Fed is going to have to come up with this enormous amount of money and flow it through again, which is monetization, which causes inflation. So this is what the media does not talk about. It does in some places in financial journals, which I read, but the public doesn't know this.
Well, I think
So, these are the hidden things that are about to jump up and hit you in the face.